I've been a nurse for a few years now. I thought I knew what to expect during the night shift at the small community hospital. The place wasn't new, but I felt comfortable among the beeping machines and the soft breathing of the patients. 3 nights ago, everything changed. Around 1 a.m., I heard faint whispers. It was so quiet I thought it was just the air conditioning or maybe echoes from a late-night conversation. But the whispers didn't stop. They got louder, more defined. I leaned in, trying to catch the words. They didn't make sense. I shook my head, thinking I was just tired. As the week passed, I noticed some patients talking in their sleep. One man kept saying he saw shadows in his room. Another woke up screaming that something was trying to pull him under the bed. I felt a chill creep down my spine. Coincidence? Maybe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong, that I kept seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. Each time, when I turned to look, nothing was there. My heart raced with fear. I kept telling myself it was just the fatigue from night shifts. But those voices seemed personal, like they were whispering my name. It felt eerie that I thought about telling one of my coworkers. But how could I explain? Hey, have you heard voices? They'd think I was going crazy. So, I stayed quiet. But the whispers grew louder, filling my head until I couldn't think straight. Each night, I felt more uneasy. Then, one night, while doing my rounds, the air felt different. It was heavy. I passed by room 203 and noticed a shadow standing in the corner. I stopped moving, waiting for it to shift. It didn't. I called out, "Is anyone in there?" No answer. My heart pounded. I should have walked away, but I felt glued to the spot. The whispers returned, calling my name. "Daniel, help us!" I stepped back, heart racing. I turned to leave, but when I looked back, the room was empty. A cold breeze brushed against me. I almost screamed. I ran, my legs moving fast, like I was being chased. Now, I dread each shift. I can still hear those whispers in my mind. I don't know what they wanted from me. I just know they're still out there, waiting. I can't sleep without checking for shadows. I can't escape their voices. What will happen next time? I still don't know why this happened. All I know is that those shadows linger. And they're not finished with me yet. That night, I approached my shift with reluctance. I could feel the weight of the whispers pressing down on me. I checked the patient logs before heading out. Room 203 was empty. Somehow, that was more unsettling. I wanted to know who had been there and why I could still feel its presence. As I walked down the dimly lit corridor, I heard the faint humming of the fluorescent lights above me. It felt like they were harmonizing with the whispers in my mind. My hands trembled slightly. I gripped the nurse's station for support, forcing myself to breathe, to focus. I stepped into the break room and poured myself a cup of coffee. Only half-heartedly, I tried to convince myself I needed to stay alert. My eyes drifted to the bulletin board. Among the usual announcements was a flyer about hospital history. It piqued my interest. I grabbed it, hoping it might distract me. That's when I noticed a name: a previous nurse who had worked here and mysteriously vanished years ago. Her name struck me, Lucy. It felt oddly familiar, like a name whispered in the dark. Just then, the hospital intercom crackled to life, breaking the silence. A voice came through, crackled with static. "Attention, we have a code blue in room 204. My heart dropped. I quickly made my way to the room, adrenaline kicking in. As I approached 204, I could see the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, ready for chaos, but it was eerily quiet. The room was dark, only illuminated by the glow of the machines. A patient lay still on the bed, the monitors beeping steadily. I frowned. This wasn't a code blue. I stepped closer, examining the patient. Just as I turned to leave, I felt a chill. A deep sense of dread washed over me. The whispers returned, clearer this time, frantic and pleading. "Help us, Daniel. You have to." I shook my head, trying to block it out. But there was something else in the room. A shadow flitted past my peripheral vision. I turned to see a figure by the window, a blurry silhouette. It was gone before I could focus on it, leaving only the whispers intensifying in my head. "She's waiting," Daniel fighting the panic rising in my throat. I rushed out of the room. I had to find out what was happening. Was Lucy connected to the shadows? What did she want from me? I headed back to the nurse's station, determined to dig deeper. I couldn't shake the feeling that my answers lay within the walls of this hospital. My instinct screamed that Lucy's fate wasn't just a ghost story. As I sat down, I glanced back at room 204. Something moved at the corner of my eye again, a fleeting glimpse of that shadowy figure, this time clearer. My breath hitched. That's when I realized, I had to go back to room 203. Something was there, waiting for me. I rose from my chair, heart racing. This time, I wouldn't run away. I needed to confront whatever was lurking in the shadows. I walked down the corridor, each step heavy with anticipation. My pulse quickened as I neared room 203. The whispers were loud now, insistent, like a crowd calling my name. "Daniel, come find us." The door was still slightly open. I hesitated for a moment, heart pounding. I pushed it all the way open and stepped inside. The room was dark, but the faint glow of the emergency lights illuminated the space just enough for me to see the bed, still unmade, and the shadows lurking in the corners. As I moved deeper into the room, I felt a chill sweep through the air. It wrapped around me like a cold hug. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. I turned slowly, half expecting to see that blurry figure again. Nothing. Just shadows. Then I noticed an old chart hanging on the wall. The name on it made me freeze, Lucy Anderson. I brought my hand to my mouth. This couldn't be a coincidence. "Why are you here, Lucy?" I whispered to the empty room. Suddenly, the whispers swelled again, louder and pleading. "Help us, Daniel." I shivered. It was as if the walls were closing in on me, each whisper intensifying my anxiety. My eyes darted around. I spotted a small object on the floor, half hidden under the bed. I knelt down, heart racing as I reached for it. It was a locket, fragile and tarnished, the kind that seemed to hold memories. The moment my fingers brushed against it, a cascade of images flooded my mind, visions of a woman in scrubs, a dark hospital corridor, and a flash of panic that I yanked my hand back, startled. Who was this woman? Was it Lucy? I had a million questions, but they were drowned out by the haunting voices. Before I could process what had happened, the lights flickered above me, casting long shadows against the walls. I felt a presence, something lingering just behind me. I whirled around, but the room was empty. "Show yourself," I yelled, my voice trembling. All I got in response were the whispers, more frantic than before. "Daniel, you have to understand. She's not the only one trapped here." My skin prickled with fear. I needed to get out. I took a step back towards the door, but it creaked shut on its own. Panic surged through me. "No. Let me out." I reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, Lucy, standing in the shadows near the window, her features shadowy and indistinct. "Daniel," she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. "You must help." Everything went black. I stumbled back, but I was still rooted to the spot. My heart raced as I struggled to breathe. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It felt foreign, grounding. I pulled it out, realizing I had a notification. One unread message. "I know what happened to Lucy." A sense of urgency clawed at me as I stared at the screen. Who was it? What did they know? I needed to find out, and fast. I blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the darkness that surrounded me. The shadows were still there, creeping along the walls like restless spirits. My phone buzzed again, breaking through the silence as I stared at that haunting message. I know what happened to Lucy. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. Who sent this? And what did they know? I backed away from the door. Panic clawed at me, but curiosity gripped tighter. I had to know. I glanced around the room one last time, trying to reassure myself that I wasn't alone. Show yourself. I shouted again, my voice more defiant than confident. Nothing answered except for the whispers that continued to fill the air. I turned my back on the door, not sure where to go next. That's when I noticed something on the nightstand, a journal, worn and tattered, its cover hiding under a layer of dust. I edged closer, pushing my fear aside. It felt like a breadcrumb leading me further into this mystery. That I opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with hurried, scrawled entries. The last one stood out. They want to let us go. Lucy can help. She knows the truth. My breath caught in my throat. Each word dripped with desperation. Who were they? Why were they trapped? The door handle rattled suddenly, making me jump. I whipped around, heart racing again. The door was still shut tight. No, not again, I whispered, ignoring the sensation of dread. I skimmed another entry. There was something about a doctor, several names mentioned, patients from years ago that had all vanished. I couldn't piece it all together, but I sensed a darker history hiding in this hospital's walls. My eyes darted around the room, searching for a witness to echo what I was feeling inside. Then, like a flash, I remembered the locket. I grabbed it off the floor and opened it cautiously. Inside was a picture of a woman. It looked just like Lucy, but older. I felt a mixture of recognition and loss wash over me. Who was the other woman? Was she connected somehow? As if in response to my thoughts, the whispers deepened, and I felt a flicker of movement behind me. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. There, in the shadows, another figure materialized, faint, but unmistakably present. Daniel, the new voice echoed, a soft, broken sound. Help me. My legs trembled, but I held my ground. Who are you? I'm not Lucy, it said, but I know where she is. My heart sank. I felt the weight of the moment. Everything slowed, and it finally hit me. I hadn't just stumbled into an old hospital room. I was standing at the edge of something much darker. What do you want from me? I managed to ask. The figure stepped closer, revealing just enough details to convey fear and urgency. You're the only one who can free us. Then everything went cold. An unseen force tugged at me, trying to pull me back into the shadows. This was my moment, an opportunity to discover the truth. But could I handle it? The lights flickered above, then crashed to darkness. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the whispers, now a chorus of terrified voices. Help us find Luke. And just like that, I was alone again, the darkness swallowing me whole. I stood frozen in the pitch black, my heart racing as I strained to hear any sound. The whispers faded, leaving only the thrum of my pulse in my ears. I couldn't stay here, but retreating felt impossible. My instincts screamed for me to run, yet something deep within me urged me to stay, to find out what was happening. That I took a tentative step forward. My foot brushed against something cold and metallic. I knelt down, my hands brushing across a small object. I pulled it closer and felt the cool surface of a key. My fingertips traced the shape. What could it unlock? The darkness felt alive around me, pressing against my skin. Come on, Daniel, I muttered to myself, forcing my legs to move. I pushed my fear aside and crept toward the door. I had to find a way out of this room, out of this nightmare. That I turned the key over in my hand, wishing for a light. I needed to see. I closed my eyes for a second, regrouping. Suddenly, a flicker of light filled the room. The emergency lights buzzed to life, casting a weak glow over the space. I scanned the dimly lit room, searching for anything that made sense. That was when I noticed a message scrawled on the wall in what looked like dried blood. Don't trust the shadows. The word sent a chill through me. Why was everything here so foreboding? Doubt crept back in. What was I doing? I was alone, without a plan. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Lucy needed my help. With renewed purpose, I forced myself to approach the door. I turned the doorknob slowly, half expecting it to be locked. Instead, it creaked open. The hallway outside was shrouded in darkness, but the emergency lights offered just enough illumination to see a few feet ahead that I stepped out, the smell of dampness and mold overwhelming my senses. My shoes squeaked against the waxed floor, echoing in the eerie silence. Lucy, I whispered, hoping my voice would shatter the stillness. Something shifted at the end of the hallway. I squinted into the gloom, heart pounding. A figure lingered just out of view, but I couldn't tell if it was real or a trick of my imagination. Is that you, Lucy? I called out, my voice steady but laced with fear. I'm here, it replied softly, a hint of desperation threading through the words. The figure took a step closer, revealing a woman with hollow eyes and a haunted expression. You have to help me. Where are the others? I asked, taking a cautious step forward. They're trapped, she said, glancing nervously at the shadows. You have to find Dr. Malvin. He knows how to release them. But watch out for the others, they don't want us to escape. The weight of her words sank in. What do you mean, the others? The air shifted, and the temperature dropped. Behind us, the shadows seemed to stretch and writhe as if alive. I felt panic rising again and looked back at the doorway I had just exited. I'll explain everything. Just trust me. She reached for my arm, her grip cold and clammy, but something instinctual told me to hesitate. Wait. I need to know more, I said, jerking away, then, a loud thud echoed behind us. My heart raced. I turned to see a shadowy presence emerging from the darkness, taller and more menacing. It moved with purpose and speed toward us. Run! She screamed, time slowed as I processed her words. I hesitated only briefly before dashing down the corridor, the sound of footsteps chasing us. We had to find an exit or the truth before whatever haunted this place caught up to us. I sprinted down the hall, my breath quickening as the footsteps echoed behind me. The woman stayed close, her presence both a comfort and a source of dread. I could feel the shadows closing in, like dark tendrils reaching out to snatch us. Where do we go? I shouted. The stairwell. It's at the end of the corridor. She replied, urgency lacing her voice. Why there? I pressed. I didn't want to leave the safety of the light, but I had no choice. The roof. It's our only chance. The fear in her eyes fueled my adrenaline. I glanced back just in time to see a dark shape flicker behind us, moving with an unnatural grace. I pushed myself harder, the walls blurring as we raced toward the staircase. As we reached the end of the hallway, the exit loomed close. I reached for the door, but it felt heavier than it should have. I pulled at the handle, panic swelling within me. Come on. She urged, her voice almost a scream now. With one final heave, the door swung open, revealing a dim stairwell. We barreled inside, heart pounding against my rib cage. The rattling echoes faded behind us, replaced by the sound of our feet slapping against the concrete steps. I focused on the ascent, each step feeling like a small victory. When we reached the top, I glanced back. Lower down, I could see nothing but darkness. No figures followed, but the shadows felt alive. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Is it safe? I whispered, my voice trembling. For now. But we need to keep moving, she insisted, her eyes darting around nervously. That we stepped onto the roof, the crisp air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. I took a moment to collect myself, but the dread still gnawed at me. I scanned the rooftop for a way down or somewhere we could hide. Do you have any idea where we are? I asked, trying to piece together the situation. Not really. It feels like some sort of hospital, but it's not right. It's like we're stuck in a loop, she answered, scanning the horizon. Suddenly, she froze, staring at something over my shoulder. Daniel, behind you. She gasped as I turned just in time to see a shadow materializing at the edge of the roof. It was the same menacing presence from before, its form indistinct yet undeniably threatening. My heart dropped. Back. We need to go back. I yelled, grabbing her wrist and pulling her toward the rooftop door again. But as we moved, the shadows began to swirl, blocking our only escape route. My mind raced. We had to find another way down. Look there. She pointed toward the far side of the roof. A fire escape. A flicker of hope surged through me. We sprinted toward it. I could see a metal ladder hanging off the side of the building. But as we reached it, the temperature dropped sharply. Shivers crawled up my spine. Daniel, hurry. She urged, her voice breaking. That I glanced back as the dark figure slithered closer. The shadows twisted, creating a wall that pushed against us. Our opening was closing in fast. Now! I shouted, grabbing the ladder and beginning to descend. But just as I reached for her, the ground shifted. I heard an unnatural hiss, like 1,000 whispers merging into one. And then everything went dark. I woke up gasping, instinctively gripping the ladder for support. It felt real, too real. My heart raced as I blinked into the darkness. I was still on the roof, but something was different. I could hear muffled voices below, the sounds swirling around me like fog. Daniel? A familiar voice called out. I strained to listen, but the words were distorted, lost in the air. Please, no, I muttered to myself, panic creeping back in. I felt her presence again, the woman from before, but I couldn't see her. Where are you? I whispered, moving cautiously along the edge of the roof, searching for any sign of her. The voices only grew louder, echoing in my mind, and I didn't want to confront whatever shadows still lingered. Daniel! The woman's voice pierced through the noise, clearer now. I followed it, each step careful and calculated. Finally, I stumbled upon her huddled by the access door. She looked shaken but alive, her eyes wide with fear. Are you okay? I asked, kneeling beside her. I thought we were gone, she breathed, relief washing over her face as she caught my gaze. Something happened. There was a ladder, and then I trailed off, the memory slipping away like sand through my fingers. I took a moment to collect my scattered thoughts. Did we make it out? I don't know. She shook her head slowly, glancing over her shoulder at the swirling shadows now creeping toward us again. There was a low rumble, like thunder but off, as if the building itself was groaning that we had to move, but I was disoriented. It felt like the roof was shifting beneath us, twisting into unfamiliar shapes. I stood up, scanning every corner. We can't stay here. There has to be an exit. But as I turned toward the door, the voices grew louder. They were chanting now, their words unintelligible, rising and falling like a tide. I could feel the shadows pressing in, a thick black fog. Daniel, we need to go. She urged, pulling at my arm. I hesitated, the door too close yet so far. I could feel the darkness reaching for me, and a jolt of adrenaline pushed me forward. I shoved the door open, stepping into the unfamiliar hallway. Once inside, I felt a sudden chill. Where do we go now? I asked, panic creeping back into my voice. Follow me, she said, taking charge as she sprinted ahead. The corridor undulated in surreal waves, claustrophobic and dark. I did my best to keep up, but the shadows behind us felt relentless. Then, I heard it again, the chanting. It wasn't just a sound, it was a pull, something deep within me harmonizing with the echo. My feet slowed as I battled the urge to turn back. Daniel! She called, the urgency in her voice snapping me from the trance. Just then, from the darkness, emerged a figure tall, cloaked in shadows, its features lost to the abyss. A wash of terror flooded my senses. "Run!" I screamed, but it was too late. I felt the whispers curling around my mind, beckoning me toward the figure. "Daniel!" The woman yelled again, her voice desperate. And then, as if breaking through a veil, clarity hit me. I couldn't succumb. I had to fight. With that thought, I lunged forward, but the darkness swallowed us whole. I felt myself being pulled down into a void. The shadows enveloped everything except the glimmer of her eyes, still bright with urgency. I reached out, trying to grasp her. "Wait!" But as soon as I extended my hand, the figure lunged. It didn't move like a person, it shifted, almost floating, as it closed the distance. I turned, adrenaline fueling me. The hallway blurred, stretching as if it were a living thing. "Keep running!" she screamed, her breath ragged. I pushed forward, desperate to escape. The darkness clung to us, a dense weight that made it hard to breathe. Somehow, I felt the walls pressing in, closing access to light and safety. That we turned a corner, and then another. I could barely keep track. Then, I spotted a doorway at the end of the hall, a faint glow spilling through the cracks. I sprinted toward it, not caring if it was a trap or salvation. "Daniel!" she shouted, slow enough for me to catch a glimpse behind us. The cloaked figure was following, its movements unnatural, gliding just above the ground. "Don't look back!" I yelled, pushing her forward. My own heart thudded in sync with the footfalls behind us, but clarity returned. I could focus. With one last surge of energy, we burst through the door. The room beyond was bright and sterile, completely different from the darkness we'd just fled. A stark white light enveloped us, washing away the shadows for a moment. "Where are we?" I gasped, glancing around. The walls were lined with strange machines and flickering screens. A sense of disorientation hit me again. Shapes on screens displayed unreadable charts and constant data streams. "It's a hospital," she panted, her voice steadying as she took in our surroundings. "But it doesn't feel right." And then I saw it, a figure on a gurney in the corner. My breath hitched. The figure looked like me. "No," I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. I stepped closer, my pulse racing. My pale skin. My hair disheveled. The gurney was empty, yet I could feel myself drawn to the ghost of what had once been. "Daniel, don't!" She grabbed my arm just as the chanting started again, echoing from the depths behind us. "Whatever it is, it won't stop," I replied, backing away from the gurney. Shadows began to creep around the edges of the room, slipping under the door as if searching for a way in. That's when I noticed something glistening under the fluorescent lights. A small metallic object lay on the floor, a scalpel, twisted at an odd angle. Suddenly, I felt the urge to grab it. Maybe it was instinct or desperation. For a moment, I swayed between sanity and a primal need to fight back. "Daniel, let us go!" she shouted, jerking me back to the moment. "We can't stay here." But it wasn't just the shadows that suffocated me. The realization of who I might become, lost forever to a darkness I couldn't understand, froze me in place. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw another figure rise from the gurney. This one flickered like a dying bulb, but it was the same face, my face, just a touch more hollow. It opened its mouth, and a deep, echoing voice sliced through the air like glass: "You can't escape." I stood there, frozen. I could feel the darkness pressing in. The chanting grew louder, and the fear twisted in my gut. "Daniel!" she yelled again, shaking me. I had to decide. Do I fight? Do I run? Before I could respond, the door burst open, revealing the cloaked figure, the shadows swirling like a storm behind it. Everything inside me screamed to flee, and in that moment, I turned. But just as I did, something inside me whispered, "You're already one of us." I stumbled back, just as the cloaked figure stepped into the room. My heart raced as I turned to flee, pulling her with me, the metallic tang of fear settling heavily in my mouth. "Now," she urged, her eyes wide with dread. I didn't need to be told twice. We darted into a narrow hallway just beyond the sterile room. Heavy footsteps echoed from the other side, beckoning us back toward the darkness we had tried to escape. "Where do we go?" I gasped, glancing around. The fluorescent lights above hummed ominously, flickering in sync with the broken pulse of my anxiety. Every corner seemed to bleed shadows as if the walls were alive. "There must be an exit," she shouted, her voice trembling. I scanned the corridor, desperate for a sign of safety, when something caught my eye. A series of doors lined the walls, each marked with cryptic symbols, letters that felt foreign. Words I couldn't decipher. "Try those." She pointed to a pair of double doors at the end of the hall. They looked sturdy, but even locked, they seemed to promise some form of safety. I rushed forward, every noise amplifying my fear whispers from behind, shadows creeping closer. I reached for the handle, but it turned with surprising ease. The doors swung open, and we tumbled inside. What met us was surreal, a dimly lit waiting room that felt frozen in time. A few flickering chairs lined the walls, and a deep silence enveloped us like a shroud. The room smelled of antiseptic and something rotten, almost sweet. I shivered. "Does this place even exist?" She breathed, staring wide-eyed at faded posters that peeled off the walls, depicting hopeful health slogans. "Does it matter?" I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady. She was right to question this space. With every moment, I could almost feel the walls closing in again. Then, my gaze settled on a large bulletin board in the corner. It was cluttered with photos, notes, and pinned articles, all screaming of unease. There were missing person flyers, snippets of lives lost or changed. My heart dropped as I recognized one of the faces. It was an image of me. "Daniel." Her voice fractured through the oppressive air. I felt ill, the edges of my consciousness skimming dangerously close to hysteria. "Why are you on this board?" I shook my head, unable to speak. I was a ghost here, trapped between familiarity and strangeness. Touching the flyer felt like reaching into a dark abyss. A low moan echoed from behind us. I turned violently, just in time to see a flicker of something moving along the corridor we just fled. It wasn't he alone, more shadows were coalescing into shapes, creeping ever closer. "Quick!" she shouted, pulling me toward a door at the opposite end of the waiting room. "This way." "Wait." I hesitated again, the weight of the missing faces urging caution. But the sound of footsteps was growing louder, almost insistent, shaking me from my trance. With no choice left, I dashed after her. As the door swung open, I felt something brush against my arm, a whisper, a promise. "Daniel, they're here." I stepped through, closing the door just in time. But as silence took over again, the fleeting echo of my own voice, pleading in the shadows, lingered. Something told me the worst was yet to come. The air in the new room was frigid, electric with tension. I turned, ready to face whatever shadows pursued us, but the door behind us held firm. We were cut off, boxed in by a surreal world that felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The flickering overhead lights bathed everything in unsettling strobe-like flashes, heightening my anxiety. What were those things? I rasped, desperation shivering through my words. The woman I had been with, who had been my tether against the dark, huddled against the wall, her eyes wide, scanning for any signs of danger. I don't know," she breathed, glancing warily at the door. "But we're running out of time. They want you." "Me?" My heart raced at the implication. "Why me?" "They need someone to complete the cycle," she said softly, eyes darting about as if she expected shadows to pounce. "You're connected to them, perhaps you always have been. This hospital feeds on its own." Lucy is part of it, and so is this place. Her words sent chills through me. Lucy? What happened to her? Where is she? I don't know for sure, she replied, apprehension thick in her voice. But she was trapped, just like us. The Dark Ones have a way of taking pieces of your mind, your memories. They want to keep your spirit wandering, lost in shadows. If you give in, you'll never escape. The gravity of her words pulled me deeper into a vortex of uncertainty. I could feel the walls pressing in, almost as if the building itself was conspiring to hold us captive. An ominous sound echoed from behind the door, whispering my name, low at first but swelling into a cacophony. Daniel, Daniel. I pressed a hand against my head, squeezing my eyes shut in an effort to block it out. The voices were no longer just words, they felt like memories clawing back to the surface, fragments of a childhood I had long forgotten, buried in the past. I stumbled backward and nearly lost my balance. What do they want with me? Only you can set them free, she insisted, voice rising. You are the key. Key to what? But before she could answer, the door burst open with a deafening crash. Dark figures coalesced in the doorway, features obscured by the swirling shadows. I felt my stomach drop as their whispers intensified. Panic flared through me, igniting my instinct to run. I instinctively grabbed the woman's wrist, pulling her away from the encroaching darkness. Come on! I shouted, dragging her toward the far side of the room. We dove into a series of empty patient rooms, the doors swinging shut behind us. We pressed our backs against the wall, breathing heavily, listening to the ominous whispers echoing outside. Each word felt like a piece of a puzzle I couldn't grasp. What do we do now? She asked, trembling slightly. Do you think we can find Lucy? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Maybe if we find her, we can break whatever hold this place has over us. That's the only way I can think of. If I can find her presence, we might have a chance, she replied, eyes narrowing with determination. Then let's go. We emerged from the room and silently moved down the dark corridor, edging toward the flickering lights ahead. My heart thundered in my chest, the shadows darting around the corners of my vision. The whispers swirled, echoing in my mind. Daniel will never know, they taunted, and I tried to shake them off like a bad dream. We turned a corner and stumbled into a small common area, chairs lined up against the walls, a tattered magazine on a coffee table. But something in the far corner caught my eye, a shadow standing alone. I froze. Do you see that? I whispered. She nodded, clutching my arm. Lucy. The shadow flickered, rippling with uncertainty. I stepped closer, every instinct warning me against it, but something deeper inside urged me to reach out. Lucy. I called into the gloom, the figure shifted, taking a faint form. Help me, it whispered, a voice damaged by time. Distracting noises came from behind us, and I felt an urge to return to the safety of darkness and shadows, but we couldn't go back now. Daniel, another voice emerged, overlapping with the first. You must break the hold they have over you. Only then will we be freed. Who are you? I forced myself to ask. What is this place? But before I could get an answer, the dark fog intensified, swirling through the doorway. The oppressive weight of it forced my back against the wall. They're coming. Run! She shouted. We lunged back into the corridor, navigating through the maze of shifting shadows. Each echo of their whispers felt more desperate, like they were scrambling to pull us back into their depths. Daniel! You need to remember. A surge of familiarity washed over me as we continued to run, familiar voices piercing through the chaos. There were flashes of images, of faces, of moments from my past harmonizing with the shadows' gatherings and celebrations, and then Lucy's laughter, a memory slowly returning from the fog. Wait! I blurted out. I remember her. In that instant, the shadows recoiled momentarily, almost like I'd struck a chord within them. I saw the way they pulsated, flickering between rage and uncertainty. Remember her. Remember us. They cried, pressing against my psyche. Lucy. I screamed, the name echoing in desperation, the urgency pushing me forward. I needed to find her. The walls felt like they were closing in, but I wouldn't let that stop me. The chaos behind us intensified, the whispers becoming a chorus of terrified voices, eager for escape. Find her. Just then, I caught a glimpse of her. Lucy. She stood at the far end of the hallway, just out of reach, a light flickering in her eyes that seemed familiar. Daniel. She called softly, brightness emanating from her figure like fragile light through shadows. Help us, please. I felt the surge of hope, fueled by desperation as I surged forward. I'm coming. But an overwhelming force shunted me aside, plunging me into darkness once more. The shadows clamored around, voices swirling, relentless. She was there, a glimpse slipping through my fingers as doom swallowed the light, then, everything shattered, the darkness receding from me as if I'd broken through a membrane, rushing toward whatever lay beyond. That I woke up gasping, the dry air of the hospital room filling my lungs. My heart raced as I looked around, disoriented. It took me a moment to realize I was in a different space, a different part of the hospital, bright, sterile, and eerily silent. The whispers had quieted. But then, they emerged again. You're one of us now, Daniel. I swallowed hard, trembling as the weight of uncertainty surged inside me. As the tendrils of shadows re-emerged, enveloping me, I felt the fragile light of hope slip again, leaving me in the silence of lingering doubt. Where was Lucy? What had become of all of us? The questions echoed in the vast emptiness of the night ahead, leaving me to wonder if I had really escaped at all. In the stillness, I remembered the locket in my pocket, trembling with the weight of lost lives, a heavier truth I was only beginning to comprehend. The darkness still loomed, long shadows curling at the edges of my mind, waiting for me to re-enter their eternal dance. I pressed my hand against my heart, unsure of what remained or what was still yet to come.